there you see the red light. That means it is recording.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's almost a little official then when we are recording it. But okay, let's start.
Let's start.
As I told you, this I think that we are just going through a short version of our introduction course. 1 hour general what is oral history, and then on Friday more detail into the interview. And we made this presentation just to start the story about Memoar. In some way you can say that it started in some kind of frustration because I used to work as a journalist, and I felt it more and more frustrating that we made interesting interviews with interesting people, and then we just used a tiny little bit about some question that was very important on the day of the interview, and then we threw away all the other things. Actually, it was one. I was working with a documentary film, and it's a long story, of course. But the point is that we made a lot of interesting interviews, actually in Ukraine and in Russia, with prisoners who have been prisoners of war in Norway during the war, the Second World War. And the media here, of course we wanted to sell our documentary film to the media, and they was not interested in history. They was just interested in, well, actually the point is that we made a lot of interesting interviews and nobody wanted to use them. So we got the idea that because in the future, when all the people who were prisoners of war in Norway, when they are dead, then probably some people will be very interested. But at that time it will be too late to hear the stories. So we thought we have to make people understand that the oral stories of the people who were in the middle of the history events, it has to be preserved, just like we preserve everything which is written, which is important, and especially in the upper class, even what they are going to buy in the shop, it's archived. But normal people and ordinary people who are not writing very much, they are disappearing in history. So the idea is to collect interviews with people who were in the middle of the historic events and preserve it for the future. But then we discovered that also in the contemporary times, people are interested in hearing these stories because, of course, we are living our life in a tiny little it's interesting for very many people to hear the life stories of other people who are living different lives. And in some way this is very important today, because I think in the modern society, we are, at least people who are living in big cities, they only meet people with their own education, their own interests, and all the people they meet, they are very they're similar to themselves. And that means that the common knowledge about how society actually functions and how it is and what people are thinking, it's been more and more narrow. And to share to make people be interested in other people's stories and to share those stories, that is a way of to counter this. I call it ghettoization. This narrowing of the common rule. So this was the idea that we started, and in parts of the world, particularly in the United States and the English world, English being Britain and India and Australia and New Zealand, there has been a tradition of collecting oral history since the first recorders came. In the 30s, they started to collect oral history in the United States. And when the cassette player came, which made it simple and cheap to record, then you got a movement in Britain. And when the digital recorders came, this movement spread particularly to Eastern Europe, because so many things happened when the Soviet Union collapsed, and lots of young people were interested in recording these events, and it spread. But one of the last places who got this oral history tradition, it was in Scandinavia. In Sweden there was some researchers, some academics. They were interested. So there is an academic network for oral history in Sweden, but they have no popular base. They are only academics. But here we didn't know this when we started Memoar. We just thought it was a good idea to collect life stories, and then once we started, we saw that a lot of people thought this was very good, that somebody else starting to work with oral history in Norway. So we got very much support from the very beginning. So that is why it has been growing so very fast. So we started in 2015. We got a little support from the government to make a course, this course that we have today. And then we got bigger and bigger projects. So now we are in some way you can say we are the Norwegian Resource Center for Oral History. We have the main office here in Bergen. We are not very big. We are only two. From September we will be three, and plus me, because I'm actually retired, but I'm going to work as long as I can.
Some volunteer.
Yes. And then we have an office in Oslo, with for the time being only one person there. Yeah, and we have big plans for the future. So we think we are just in the beginning of this oral history movement in Norway. That was Memoar. You don't have to sit and listen to me. Just ask or comment or whatever. I tried to in 2 sentences just to explain what oral history is. And I think, at least to me, the important thing to understand is that history, when we read a book about history, it looks like the history is very logical and structured, and because the article is logical and structured. But the history itself is never logical or structured. It is a lot of, so you can say another way to look upon history is to regard history. It's a lot of different lived lives together, side by side, and interconnected. For instance, what the history of a country or an age or something, it's so complex and so complicated. So each time a new person starts to write a book about it or something, it can be a different story, because it's too complicated to get to tell one story about. In earlier days, you only had the source material that could be preserved. That was written materials and things and all these things that are in museums. But today we also have the possibility to collect the oral stories of people, and different people telling different stories, but it's all primary sources. So this is in some way to collect, document, archive, and disseminate the diversity of history. In some way, that's the idea about oral history, and that's also what this this little introduction will be about. I didn't reach to change this because I was in a shipyard 10 days ago. I had the same presentation there in Norwegian, of course, just to make an example of what I mean. Is that you can say in seafaring history, you normally the sources that the historians can work with, that's usually coming from the ship owners. They write reports and everything, and letters and everything, and the government, like the ambassadors in the harbor cities around the world, they are writing their reports, and the officers on the ship, they are writing their reports, and that's what you use to make history. But there is a lot of other occupations. You have the other sailors. Maybe they disagree with the officers. Maybe they have a completely different history. You have the people making the sails and those carpenters who built the boat. You have all kinds of occupations, and you have, because of that, you have a lot of things that those people will never write about. But to understand the maritime history, you have to take into consideration all these other things. And maybe if you are a historian, you have a kind of imagination, but that will be subjective. It's only maybe you have been on a sailing boat, so you think that they have to. The officers write about so and so, but of course the sailors must have been very hungry, so maybe or whatever. So that the idea is to and this if you have a digital base of historical source material, then of course you are searching for keywords, and if you only have this written material, there's a lot of keywords you will never find any answers to, because in the spoken stories you tell about very much more things and you use other words. So in some way, this is this is the traditional historical sources, and this is the oral sources. So that's why I think it's so important. And there's one more thing. I think, like we are doing now with this Ukrainian war series of interviews, it is not enough to make one interview. It's when you have a collection, where if you have 40 interviews about the same topic with people experienced it on different ways, then you have a rich source material. That's why I think it's just like a puzzle. You put all the life stories together, and then you get a picture full of diversity and full of all this complexity that history is full of. So this, what I thought that we will try to go through these 2 hours. It's the point one: how to collect oral history, how to ensure that future generation can find it, can find what we collect, and also, of course, the present people today. How to make sure that it will not get lost, because this, what we are doing today, it will be able to find it in 500 years if we have the right archiving solution. So that is very important. And finally, how to use it. How can it be used? So, this is the first. When we are collecting oral history, the way we do it, that is that we are always making a project with a focus. Like our project is the focus of the impact of the war in Ukraine, in Bergen. Actually, that's the focus, and that is, well, at least the way I think, that is that the most important impact, of course, is the refugees coming here. But it's also very interesting with people like you, Ukrainians who are already living here. Suddenly you get a lot of new Ukrainians coming as refugees. And then it's important people like me, because I'm very engaged in the war. I start every morning, so what happened tonight, and I'm very frustrated about the Norwegian media because they write nothing. A little, but very little. So you have to. I follow in different international media just to try to get an impression. But I think lots of Norwegians are very not only interested, but they are very engaged in what's happening, and it's changing the history of Europe and changing. Like in Sweden, suddenly they have been neutral for hundreds of years, and then suddenly they want to join NATO. And this is just one example on how this changes the history of Europe. So we should actually now I'm not quite sure if the Ukrainian the Ukrainske Forening, if it looks upon itself as a partner in this project, but we would like very much that they did. So this is not a Memoar project, but it should be a cooperation between Memoar and the Ukrainske Forening. And maybe the Bymuseum will come in later on. So I think because the project is better if we normally try of course we are taking part. We normally try to get an institution to take part and a volunteer organization to take part. So these three parts we like to, because then the project is solid. And then, of course, when we start a project, we usually start with inviting these partners, and then we make a course like this, and then during this course we plan the process, and then we start interviewing and documenting, in our project because this happened so fast. The war started, and we made this interview with Victoria and
Malvina var.
Malvina. Yeah.
Victoria, Malvina, or then it was me.
Yeah. Yes.
And we are from the Ukraineske Forening.
Yes. And at that time there was no refugees had come.
No.
But and I don't know, but I thought that this war would be very short. In February I thought it would be short. But then very fast we understood that, oh no, Ukraine is fighting back. This is going to not be a short war, this is going to be a very long war. And then we got this idea, we have to start, this is important, this is something of the most important things that happens in the history. So we have to start working with this. And then we just started to make interviews. And then the idea came when we had this first meeting that, okay, let's start a project. And let us so actually we started we started with point 4, and then we made point 2, and then we made point 1. and the point 3, we haven't started yet. Yeah, okay. We come back to that. But that's how we organize collecting. And then, oh sorry. Yeah. Oh yeah. This is in our work. We have 2 kinds of projects. We have thematic projects, and then we are into like seafaring or industry, history, or climate change. It's a new project, and this, of course, war in Ukraine. We are not. It will be interesting with interviews from all over Norway about in a thematic project. It's practical to work in Bergen because then we don't have to travel so much. But like we talked about, the Stella had to go to Notodden, and maybe, of course, if we can work digitally together with Stella, it will be very interesting to make some interviews in Notodden too. But the other projects, they are geographic. That's local history. And of course, they have, like the local history of Bergen, that's mainly interesting in Bergen. And we have big projects like Bergen, which is a big town, and we have small parts of like Tøyen is a part, is a city district in Oslo. And we have big places and small places. So yeah. Next point, that is the ethics. Because of course, like in all publishing work, you have to take you have to think about ethics. We discuss ethics a lot because there is in the last years there has been a lot of focus on privacy, and you got this European Union made this GDPR directive that restricts privacy quite a lot, and that's of course because internet made it very easy to spread stories about private persons, and there is there's a lot of problems about because publishing is so easy, so that you have a lot of restricted juridical laws, new laws, and everything, and a lot of serious people are afraid of all this news. They are afraid of doing something wrong. So that is actually a big problem for oral history, because people in museums, they are so afraid of doing something wrong that they rather will do nothing. And of course that is a problem. So we actually have adopted the thinking of from serious media or the press ethics, because we say we are making interviews and then we are publishing the interviews. So that is just the same thing as a newspaper or as a television station. So we use the same ethics as them. But except for on one point, and that is that if I interview you as a journalist, point one, I never write a consent form. Journalists don't do that, because a journalist is asking people questions, and when they answer, the tape belongs to the journalist, and he has the right to do with, as long as he's not doing anything illegal, it's his tape or his recording, so he uses it the way, because he is going to, the journalist is going to tell a story, and the interviews is only kind of a documentation in the journalist's story. We think differently, because we are collecting your story and your story. We are not publishing the interviewer's story. We are collecting the interviewee story. So that means that this is more like if you write an article for the newspaper, then it is your expression. And luckily we have a freedom of expression, and to write an article in the newspaper, that is your right as a citizen. The editor doesn't have to publish it. So you are not guaranteed that it will be published, but it is your right to write it and to send it to the newspaper. And if the newspaper publishes it, it is your property, this article. We think in the same way. When we made like the interview we made with you, that's your story, and it's your freedom of expression, and you own it. So, and you decide if it should be published or not. So we write this. We have this consent form that we have translated into Ukrainian. That says, in the first consent form, we said that we agree that we are now making an interview, we are recording it, and we are archiving the interview, and we are documenting it. I'm coming back to how we document it. And if we agree on that, then we write this consent form, and then we have the documentation that this was done. The interviewee was aware that the interview was recorded and accepted it, and that it will be archived and everything. So, and then we finish it and make it ready for publishing, and then again we ask the interviewee do you want this to be published? And if the interviewer says okay, remove the password, let it be published, then we write this consent. And when this is very important in Memoar's ethical philosophy, or what you call it. So that means that we are collecting and publishing or sharing. We like the word sharing, because we are not publishing like a newspaper, we are just sharing stories. We are not publishing our stories, we are sharing the interviewees' stories. And we have documented that this was done in all that is published with the consent of this interview. So that is in a nutshell our ethical thinking. Comments? Okay,
Everything is absolutely clear.
Okay, yeah, okay, we just run through it, and then we can discuss afterwards. So, when the interview is done, then next question is, how shall people find it in 100 years? And that is why we are making this log. That is, have you seen on our website? Because I don't think we have finished any. Just a moment. I'll just show you how it looks. I will some. Nej, här har vi. This is our web page, and if we take, for instance, we can search for CNS. This is I was very fascinated by this this lady. She was 90 years old when I interviewed her, and she had a very two times I visited her in her home, and she was telling for 2 hours each time. So this is 4 hours altogether. And of course, 4 hours with life stories, it's very interesting if you just start reading it, but normally you don't have time. Normally, if you are interested in something that happened in the 50s, you are looking for specific things. Mm-hmm. So we make this short what's it called, abstract of the interview. It's only about half a page. About this interview is with this person, and it's about so and so. And then we have this detailed log. This is part 1. She starts with a name, where she was born, and then where she was baptized, and she tells a little story about 2 aunts she had, and the names of the aunts are there because maybe someone are searching for those people one time. Where she has a little interesting story about her childhood house. So that is linked, so you can just click on this link, and then you get the story about this house. And then and so on. So her brothers, how when they slaughtered pigs in the backyard. She lived in the center of Bergen, and they had a pig. And in the autumn they slaughtered the pig. And she was fascinated by this. And at 5 minutes and 25 seconds, she tells about when they got a water closet, because this was a very big thing that happened in her childhood, and so on. Quite detailed, and to make this detailed log, that's much more work than the interview. But it is much less work than transcription, because normally when people in the beginning, when the recording equipment came, people used recording equipment, but the tapes were very expensive. So instead of archiving the tapes, they made a transcription. And that was a detailed, every spoken word was written down. And that is a lot of work. It may, 1 hour interview, you can, it normally takes 8 hours to write it out. But we do not transcript. We make this log. And that one of our young people, Sebastian, I don't know if you have met him, but he's the one who's going to start in Memoar in the autumn. He is able to, in an interview, 1 hour interview, is he able to log in 1 hour. But he's incredibly efficient. I need maybe 2 hours, but that is But the point with this log is, of course, that you can search for it in a big collection. You can search for water closet, and then you can got different people telling about when the water closet came. Yeah, so that is the idea about the log. Sorry. And once you have I used to when I used to make the interview, to edit the video, the finished video, then do the logging, and when the logging is done, it's very easy to write the short text abstract, because then you have the login and you can just look through the login and write this short text about what it is. And so, in addition, you have this, when you have a big collection, maybe this is the interview with Siren, with this lady Sirnes. It's about the local history of Bergen. And maybe water closet is a little specific. And it's not special for Bergen. It's the history of the water closet. It's as interesting in. I heard a very interesting story, by the way. Last week I was in the north, in a town called Rana, Mo i Rana, and there actually was a story, a very interesting story about the water closet, because they got the water closet during the war, the wartime, the Second World War. And then, you know, Norway was occupied by Germany, and there was a Nazi government installed by the Germans. And they wanted to impress, they was not very interested in impressing the Norwegian people, but because they had the power anyway, they got it from the Germans, but they were very interested in impressing the Germans. So they, in Mo i Rana, there was a Nazi politician. He made some houses got water closets, but they didn't get the pipelines and to take. So they had water closet in the house, and everything just ended up outside.
Very impressive.
Yeah. But of course, that means, in the local history of Bergen, of course, the infrastructure is interesting, and you could put these water closet stories into a bigger keyword called infrastructure, together with electricity and the roads and bridges and everything. So you need some rougher keywords, just to make it easier to search in big collections. And if I dream about that in the future, maybe you will have thousands of interviews about local history in Bergen, and then it is very difficult to find but if you have rough keywords that sorts out that these people are talking about infrastructure, and then you can search for water closet among those. So it's in some way it's two levels of keywords: the detailed keywords in the log and the rougher keywords in the keyword list. And this rough keywords, it is also a good help for the interviewers, because if you have decided that, let us, for instance, in our project, it's very interesting to hear about what happened on the 23rd and 24th of February. Of course, that is important, and if we later on we shall discuss this, how can this be used. But as you know, one of my ideas is that maybe we can make something in the theater to remind people, or to show this year how has it been like. And then if we have like 10 different stories about what happened on the 24th of February, it would be, that can be very useful in the theater. So I think it's a good idea to ask absolutely everyone we interview, tell about the 24th of February. So that could be one keyword, February 24th. And then there is, we should discuss a list of keywords that is interesting to ask everybody about. Every interview, of course, will be different because it's different persons, but it's a good idea to make sure that some questions are asked to all, even if they have nothing particular to tell. Just then, because if we, yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay. I just continue. So this about eternal archiving. That is very important, of course, because I personally have experienced once that because we started this oral history work once time before, and it was the archive question was not solved, and I hope it's not lost, but it was published, but it was taken down because this was earlier, so it was very expensive, and we didn't have the money to make sure that if we collect a lot for the future and it is lost, then we have worked in vain. So it's very important to solve. And in my opinion, we need a modern society needs a national archive for oral history. And again, the Americans they have set a very good example in this called Library of Congress in the United States. They have a huge collection of oral history. And then Britain has done the same. They have a huge, in the British Library, they have hundreds of thousands of hours with oral history, all from the war times and up till now. They started a big project called National Life Stories in 1987, and it's still going on. They're just interviewing ordinary people about their life stories. And more countries have done it in the same way. And I am quite sure that we will get it in Norway. We have worked for it since we started, we have worked for it, and now I think within a year or two, the government will tell the National Library that they will have the responsibility to make eternal archiving of oral sources. So, yeah, I'm quite sure that this will be. We have a Ukrainian sister organization called Association for Oral History in Ukraine. And we have written to them and told about our project here, and said that if they are interested in the material, we want to share it with them. So they have not answered yet. So I don't know.
I have some ideas, and I have talked a little bit to people who we can make connection. But we were a little bit busy with some other things. But no, it's nice that you told about it. So I will take this question up one more time.
Yeah.
Because there is a woman in Kiev, or she is in Kiev. Actually, her house was in Bucha.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not destroyed.
Okay.
But occupanten,
Yeah.
they have been, they were there, and they left a house in absolutely terrible condition. But actually, she is one who is very much in the history, and I think she can make some connections.
Yeah.
Maybe she will take responsibility herself. So we will see how it will. But just for me to take this question up again.
Yeah, and that's very good. And this has no hurry, because when we have made the interviews, they are secured. Because so it will be we have made a temporary archive that will be when this national library solution is in place. We will deliver everything there. So that I'm quite confident that once it is done, we have secured it for the future. So of course our Ukrainian colleagues, they are in the middle of a war, so it's very understanding that they have no time for this now, but maybe in 10 years they are interested, and then they can get it. But of course it would be interesting, because I think they have something similar in Ukraine. At least it looks like that in the website. So they are collecting oral history about what's happening now in Ukraine, and maybe it is a good idea to make an international project about all these refugees, because a lot of people have gone abroad. We'll see.
We'll see. And some people they have already come back. They have come back. It's also a story how they experience life abroad, and how they experience democracy, how they experience attitude. It's also a little bit interesting to talk to people.
Absolutely.
So for the because I have heard already so many stories, not so many, but a part of stories, very positive, from people who were in Poland, and some stories are not very positive. And so my question is like that: who is making not positive stories? How, and what is actually the reason that people were treated not so good? So this is my next step.
Yeah.
When I'm in Ukraine, I will try to find who makes stories, which type of stories.
Yeah, that's interesting. And of course, probably we are going to discuss this in 100 years from now. It's a similar, in the Second World War, Norway was occupied by Germany, and a lot of refugees went to Sweden, and a lot of refugees went to Britain, and some refugees went to Russia. And some came back. Very few came back, but some went back. They experienced, of course, very different things in these places, and how the war develops from day to day. Of course, one day you are optimistic and it's soon finished, we are going to win, and the next day maybe you are pessimistic, and I can imagine those people, among those people who are going back to Ukraine, maybe they managed to free Kharkiv. Maybe the war is almost ending now, and so they are optimistic and go back, and then the missiles come again, and history made every day, and people are going to write books about it and films about it in 100 years. I'm quite sure. Yeah, okay. And, we are approaching the end of this this first edit, and that is the use of the oral history sources. Because I think it's a kind of democratizing the history in several ways. But one of the ways is that history should not only be the story about the upper classes, the kings and the generals and the prime ministers, and it should be the story of the people. And so, but if you're going to collect or to understand the story of the people, you have to have the people have to be your sources. So to make in the future that people have access to ordinary people's life stories, I think that is a part of democratizing. And also that like this idea about the ship officers and the sailors. The story of a storm in the Atlantic, it can be very different when the ship officer, when the captain tells it. And he likes to tell the story of how brave he was and how well he was doing the no, and maybe the sailors have a completely different story. You never know, at least you never know if you have not heard the sailors' story. And so there is well, at least in Norway, we are used to that people have the freedom of expression about today, in journalism and in the journalist media and everything. We are used to that we have the freedom of expression. But when the history is going to be written, we are not used to demand the same freedom of expression. That my version of what happened in Norway in the 60s, I have the right to that in the National Archive, my version of the 60s in Norway should be found. Not only the Prime Minister's version of it or this. So this is in some way it's two ways. It's democratizing in the collection phase, and it's democratizing in the use of and then it is also this wonderful idea that I like this idea that we have been discussing to try to make some artists interested in our project and try to make a theater performance or something in February 24th next year. It will be, I think that could be very important for Bergen and for Norway, of course, just to show, because yesterday there was in the news here, in the television news, some people saying, now it looks that the war in Ukraine is coming further and lower down in the newspapers. It's longer and longer time between each news because it's now people are tired of the war in Ukraine. They want something new. Then now it's Boris Johnson. He's on the top and not the war. And that it always happens. People are the memory of people is very short. So when a whole year has gone, however it is that whatever happens in Ukraine, this will be a very important year in the Ukraine, in the history of Ukraine, and the history of Europe, and the history of Norway, and the history of Bergen. I'm very sure that and we need something to happen on the 24th of February that can make people reflect about this year.
Så if we have energy to do, maybe there will be no food i det hele tatt. Hvis det er matkriser som kan være. You have heard that Ukrainian corn is blocked. Ships with corn is blocked.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying maybe we will not have any energy to make any performance Just we will sit and drink water because it's for free in Norway. Nobody knows. We are sitting cold, no money to pay for the electricity, no money to buy some food, or no nothing. 24th of February, who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows what we can expect if he is still alive, this in Kreml.
Yeah. But to be a little cynical, whatever happens, it will be interesting.
It will be interesting.
Yeah. Pause.
Pausa.
And then